Hello everyone, thanks for joining me today. Have you just graduated from university? If so, massive congratulations to you. Are you now on a massive job hunt for your very first job? Or are you someone that's been in the role for quite some time, is a little bit bored, is looking for a new challenge and maybe a step upwards? Then if so, then you have definitely come to the right place. So for the past 6.5 years, I've been working for a clinical research charitable organisation. We're based at one of the London hospitals, and part of my role is recruiting new members of staff. I have read hundreds upon hundreds of job applications for various different roles within our organisation, from admin and finance to fundraising and clinical research. As you can imagine, when you receive such a high and mixed volume of applications, there's quite a few things that stand out. So that's literally what I'm going to talk through in this video. I will say that a lot of this is tailored towards applications where they ask you to submit a covering letter and your curriculum vitae. If, however, you are asked to submit a general kind of standard application form, then a lot of the tips and tricks can definitely be incorporated into that. Let's talk about the basics. Spelling and grammatical errors can be such a turn-off for prospective employers. Your CV and your covering letter is meant to be the best version of you. You've put a lot of thought into it, and if you have these kind of mistakes, how is an employer meant to trust you with corresponding with important people like journalists, patrons, trustees, donors, porters, or producing really important reports? It's really important to get the organisation's name correct. So my charity has a very similar but not identical name to another charitable organisation operating in the same field. Also, a couple of years ago, we were advertising for, I think, a charity administrator, and people were sending in applications for a customer services representative, for a PA, for all sorts of things. So just be aware of the organisation and the actual job title that you're applying for. I wouldn't choose a font size smaller than size 11 because things can get a little bit tricky to read. And also my final top basic tip would be to apply as soon as possible. Try not to leave it to the last minute. I'm one of those recruiters where I like to read the applications as and when they come in, and if you're applying sooner, you're probably giving yourself a better chance than if you apply right at the last minute. It also shows good time management. Your covering letter is like a taster, an appetizer to the employer before they go on to read your curriculum vitae. So if possible, and where possible, inject some personality, some enthusiasm, and definitely inject charm. A lot of the covering letters that I read are quite bland and formulaic, and people literally just saying in a narrative form what they've done in their CV. The main purpose of the covering letter is to sell yourself, to explain to the employer in a concise and articulate way why you are the best person for the job. You can briefly refer back to career and educational highlights and just tie it back in to the person specification or the job description. I've read a lot of applications where people say I've had 5 years experience working in the charity sector and I can meet your requirements. And for me, that's just a really abrupt way of selling yourself. You can definitely elaborate, tell us where you worked, what was your job title, what did your skills involve, and how are they transferable to this job. So try and incorporate it and try and tie in to this new role that you really, really want. I'm always super impressed when an applicant puts in their first paragraph of their cover letter why they want to work for my charity, why we are different and special and better than the rest of the other charities within our field. When they've gone onto the website, they've shown that they've taken the time to read and learn about the work that we do, and they maybe inject things about the programs, the projects, or the outreach services that they particularly identify with. You don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel and rewrite things from the website. You can just maybe copy and paste it. It requires a little bit of thought, but we're not asking you to be an expert on our charity, but just tell us why we're special than the rest. It should never really be more than a page long and maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs at most. You don't want to overwhelm the employer. Also, it's really important to add in some salutations. A lot of people just dive in and go blah, 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 blah. Why don't you add a little bit of courtesy in there and write "Dear Sir, Madame," and then end it with "Yours faithfully," or "Dear Mr. Smith," and say "Yours sincerely." As a rule, I don't think that curriculum vitae should exceed more than 2 pages of A4 paper unless you're a really kind of specialised person, maybe like a doctor or a surgeon. Some of their CVs can be 10 to 20 pages long. So in this case, try and keep it simple, 2 pages. Make sure that the layout is very clean, it's very well organised, it's clear, you're not using too big or too small a font, and also be really careful with the type of font as well. Don't use anything too fussy or overly decorative, just try and keep it as plain and clean as simple. The ones that I like are Arial, Calibri, and I think it's Gothic Century Gothic. That's used in a lot of CVs. So underneath your name and contact details, it's always useful to have a career summary, which can consist of 3 or 4 bullet points highlighting your career and educational achievements, as well as outlining any key skills and experience. I'm just going to read you a few from mine. I'm obviously going to substitute the places that I've worked for. So I say I've had experience at several charities, including Save the Children, Oxfam, and the World Food Programme. I'm educated to postgraduate level with a master's in public health, and I say where I've got that from because it adds a little bit more kudos to my CV. And then I say I have excellent written and verbal communication skills. I build strong relationships with patients, surgeons, donors, student supporters, and volunteers. And then it's always good to put something at the end of that just to say what you are, like your kind of personality traits. So I say that I react positively in the light of shifting and competing time pressures. I'm warm, thorough, and have a keen focus on getting the job done correctly. In your employment history, it's really important to put down your job title, the company or organisation name, and when you worked there. I have seen a lot actually of CVs where people say they worked for, I don't know, BP, British Petroleum for example, and they've not said what they did there, what the job title was, which I found so strange. So definitely have those 3 things in there. There are 2 ways of listing your work experience. The first is task-based and the second is skill-based. So by task-based, I mean listing all the current tasks and responsibilities that you undertake. For example, responsible for the efficient sorting of incoming and outgoing mail. So you can list all those things there, but it doesn't really give the employer a full flavour of all the skills that you have learned and developed in that particular role. This is where a skills-based listing of all the things you do is far more helpful. So by that, instead of just having the task, I would say organisational skills dash effective sorting of incoming and outgoing mail. Do you know what I mean? It just helps the employer identify the transferable skills that you have in this job and previous jobs, and seeing how that ties in with the prospective job that you're applying for. So say for example, I'm going to read you some from mine. I say communications dash. I handle inquiries from surgeons, dentists, doctors, NHS officials and journalists in a professional manner, dealing with these to conclusion where possible or referring them to the appropriate person. It just provides a little more depth to the task that I'm doing. Let me read you another one. Executive support. Draft correspondence and documents on behalf of the Chief Executive, provide financial and project grant information to the Board of Trustees, and source free legal advice and liaise with lawyers. I do think using the skills-based method is far more powerful for the employer because they're not having to field through all the tasks and trying to determine what skills that you might have. You are literally laying it slap bang on the paper for them so it's clear for them to see. Following on from your work experience, you can add in your educational qualifications, starting with the most recent first. I would always include the name of the academic institution along with the grade that you have obtained. Listing your volunteer work can be really important if you're a little bit light on work experience in the charitable field. It can also demonstrate where you like to spend your spare time and your commitment to helping others. So definitely list as much as you can there. And then we're on to hobbies, where you can put a line or 2 about the extracurricular activities that you get up to. The more fun and diverse, the better, I would say, about that one. And then we finish on references, which I always say available upon request rather than providing actual contact details. You can provide those when you're shortlisted or selected for the job. So I hope you found this video useful. A lot of thought and energy has gone into it. I know what a difficult process it can be, what a laborious and time-consuming process it can be for applying for lots of different jobs, but I do think the more thought and effort you put into making it tailored and specific to that particular organisation, I think you have a better chance of being successful. So yes, please remember to like, subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Lots of love. Bye!